And we are live, back again, another Wednesday night. You know what's funny, Tim? When we decided that we were going to do this at 8 o'clock, it was like August. So it's like, in the summer, like 8 o'clock feels more like 6 o'clock. And now that it's been dark for like an hour and a half, I'm like, man, maybe we should do 7 o'clock. So I don't know. I don't know about your schedule, but 8 o'clock feels late, at least for me. But we are here. We're talking Penn State, USC. We'll allow some time to get people in. I also want to tweet it out from the main BSD. We are live talking Penn State and USC.
Well, what are you gonna do next month when it gets dark at like 4:30?
I don't even want to talk about that.
I mean, it'd be good for the whiteout at least against Washington. So
true, yeah. This 3:30 kicks all of a sudden become a little darker. But if not to get political, but if somebody did run on the account of they get rid of pushing the clocks back, I would have to strongly think of endorsing them because, yeah, I'm not a fan of the get dark at 4:45 here on the East Coast from November. What is it, like November to, I guess
March.
It's like February. Is it March? Okay.
Yeah, it's like first Sunday in November, and then I think first or second Sunday of March is when it's when
I always say it's half the year when it's really like 4 months, but still. It
used to be longer. I think they changed it. I forget which administration it changed, but it used to be like late October. It would start daylight savings, or it would end, and then it would start again in April. So now it's a shorter window of that darkness.
Well, I'm not a fan regardless. Let's completely get rid of it.
Yeah, you and I both. So.
All right, just going to tweet it out. We have it on BSD. Come join. All right, Tim, let's get into it. So once again, I was out for the UCLA recap. So I was not able to watch.
You got any final thoughts about that?
I was going to say, I wasn't able to watch you in Lando. So what was your well, I feel like everyone's takeaway after the game was probably, a little ho-hum, like Penn State won, but didn't look that great. And then you see what happens to Alabama. You see what happens to Tennessee. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, 1-0, 5-0 on the year. Can't really complain. Is that kind of where you were at with
yeah, I'll take a ho-hum win like that any day of the week over getting upset. Frankly, I never, even though it was a little annoying at times to see the offense get off to a slow start again, they didn't really get it going until second quarter, but I never really felt like they were in any danger of getting upset or that UCLA was going to make this a 4-quarter game. So, it's just one of those games. You just get through it. I would like to say you get through without knowing no key players getting hurt, but obviously Anthony Donko left early with shoulder injury, but we'll get into that. It sounds like he's doing okay. We'll see. And of course, no Nick Singleton a very last second decision, like caught the coaching staff and Drew Aller off guard because the whole week they thought, the last few days they thought he was going to be good to go. And I know he sat out practice, probably some bumps and bruises, but I guess maybe he tried to go at it or during warmups and maybe just didn't feel right. Whatever it was, very last second scratch. So it was just the Katron Allen show for the most part with a little bit of Quentin Martin sprinkled in. So obviously you could tell they could use Nick's explosiveness, and we'll get into this with the practice report, but I think they will very much have Nick and his explosiveness back on Saturday.
Yeah, we can get right into it because, I mean, as far as my UCLA thoughts, like I said, it's kind of like everybody else where, I mean, I would love for Penn State to come out and win and dominate, and I don't like the slow starts and stuff like that. But also for where it seems like everyone's kind of at this year in college football, or at least 98% of teams where everyone is flawed. Can't complain about a game where Penn State was in control. I don't know if I want to say firmly in control, but I mean UCLA was never actually going to win that game. So
No.
Yeah, slightly annoying that they can't just look a little bit more dominant. Would have been nice to have a neck crack game as you head into the schedule with USC and Wisconsin and Ohio State and Washington. But once again, you see what Vanderbilt does to Alabama. You see what Arkansas does to Tennessee, and you're just happy to escape with a win. So, yeah, let's get into the practice updates that we had tonight as the media made their way to right outside the Lash building and saw Penn State practice, or at least saw a portion of practice, got to talk to James Franklin, and I'm sure some players as well. Like you said, Nick Singleton was absent last Wednesday from practice. This week he was out there. He was practicing, and it seems like he was a full participant from everything that we can tell. So my guess is last week that if Penn State was playing Ohio State, that he plays. And it being UCLA, they probably were just being extra cautious. If he was 75%, there's really no reason to push him out there, and certainly have him for the full game. So certainly would expect that he's going to be back in uniform and fully playing this week against USC. And then, Anthony Donko was another guy that went down last week. He got beat on a pass rush move. I think it was in the first quarter, I want to say. Hurt his shoulder, and you can kind of see it just swinging around as the play was really going on. You see something like that, you automatically think that he might have popped his shoulder out. So that could have been a longer injury, but it seems like he should be okay. You were telling me beforehand as we were trying to find, different tweets about Donko that I saw a video of him working on the sled. So he was going through drills, but that during a one-on-one portion, he might not have been partaking in, but go ahead.
Yeah, Daniel Gowan from Lions 24/7 noted, Donko's in uniform participating in position drills. However, when the O-line made its way to the defensive field for one-on-one competition, Daniel noted Donko was not involved during a brief look at those reps. Now, we're talking about a brief look at those. Maybe Donko was just taking a breather from those. I don't know honestly, I don't know how these practices work, but I wouldn't put too much into not seeing him for a brief look, especially if he was seen in uniform earlier and participating in drills. I mean, that's a good sign in of itself. It sounds like he's going to be on the travel roster.
Franklin did say, this is from Onward State, shout out the great people at Onward State. Onward State said that Franklin said he anticipates having Anthony Donko on Saturday. So,
okay.
Yeah. Well, once again, it could just be a case of them being cautious with him in practice, and honestly could have just been the one-on-ones that they saw that for whatever reason they gave the reps to Rucci instead. So positives coming out of this.
That's good. They're building depth on that part of the O-line. Rucci did a decent job filling in for him against UCLA the rest of the game, and so like I said, just building some depth on the lines. And I mean, that's not to spoil my prediction, but I think I really like where Penn State stands on the line, both sides of the ball against the Trojans.
So let's just jump right into that, because I know last week, obviously we were just talking about UCLA. It's not the biggest game, but we went like 35 minutes before we even got into UCLA. I want to make sure that we kind of hit the USC stuff right away this week. I shouldn't say not as big of a game, because I do consider this a big game for Penn State, despite the fact that USC is now unranked. They lost to Minnesota on the road at Minnesota last week. But
they were close losses. I mean, a bounce here, maybe a call that, maybe they're 5-0, or, maybe they're 4-1, but it's a way it's bounced for them.
Yeah, so they lose on the road at Michigan, and then last week they lose on the road at Minnesota. 2 games that they, like you said, definitely could have won, but kind of takes a little bit of luster out of this game, just being that USC doesn't have a ranked number next to them. But still, all things considered, Penn State going to USC to play the Trojans in a Big Ten game, that's always going to be, I think, considered a big game. So you kind of mentioned before that you think Penn State's going to have obviously some areas where they're going to be able to have advantages. So why will Penn State win? Let's look at this from 2 perspectives. Why will Penn State win, and why will Penn State lose? And let's start with the winning part. How is Penn State going to win this game, considering that they are favorites?
Well, Penn State wins this game if they bully them around in the trenches, the O-line and the D-line on both sides. So, I mean, obviously Penn State, they bring that They're offensively, their ground attack is going to be key. So I said it's great news that Nick Singleton seems to be healthy and a full participant in practice, because he was definitely missed out there last week against UCLA. I have no doubt if he had played last week, if he was 100% healthy and played last week, Penn State would have had at least 7 more points on the board. And let's face it, 34-11 looks prettier than 27-11 against, UCLA. But it's either here and there. But getting him going, getting him and Allen going, I think that's going to be key on offense. And I do anticipate USC will maybe at some point they'll try and stack the box a little and make Drew Aller try to beat them with his arm. And, well, it's their funeral if they want to do that, because Drew has definitely shown himself to be capable of also beating teams with his arm when push comes to shove. So I think you're going to see a lot of trying to establish the run. And, of course, to keep him honest, they'll definitely have Drew air it out some. And I think, he'll come up with his usual crazy motions. And I would love to see him bring Benga Ioane into motion again and just, flatten some dude like he did last week. That was pretty fun to watch. So I think that the key is going to be, though, that offensive line. They've been really good this year, and they pushed around UCLA last week. They pushed around Illinois the week before, and USC, their defense, as improved as it's been, one place they've struggled with is up front. They haven't been able to. They've kind of gotten pushed around by Michigan and Minnesota's O-lines, and they were able to run the ball right at them. And they've also struggled with getting like a pass rush out of their D-line, which is another thing. And pass rushing in general has been an issue with USC. So those are things I think the offense can pick apart. And also, I mentioned defensively, USC's offensive line has had some issues with handling opposing D-lines. Michigan and Minnesota were able to, Minnesota, especially last week, they were able to get pressure on Miller Moss. And the thing is, Miller Moss, when you give him time to throw, he can be pretty good. But if he is forced to scramble, he's not the most mobile of guys. Not a statue per se, but he's no Caleb. No one's mistaken for Caleb Williams back there, being able to get away from trouble. So I think there's an opportunity there for the D-line, like Abdul Carter, Dylan Sutton, and especially Zane Duran, who's, I think I mentioned it on the previous show last week for UCLA. Zane Duran's been a real pass rushing force up the gut, which is a nice luxury to have, in my opinion. I think they can really pose some potential problems there again. I just think USC, and this is what I was thinking of when they first came in to the Big Ten, I just wasn't sure if they had the physicality. They didn't have the build on the trenches to withstand a Big Ten schedule. And thus far, it seems to be playing out that way. And things are not going to get any easier for them this Saturday against these Penn State fronts.
To piggyback off that, Tim, USC's rush defense is second worst in the Big Ten. They're giving up 4.96 yards per carry, which, once again, not very good. And earlier this year, they lost one of their, top 3 defense tackles. I wouldn't say they was a starter, but Bear Alexander, guy who was at Georgia. He actually looked at coming to Penn State at one point when he was in the portal, but chose USC. It was just say flamboyant with his NIL deal. I know he had posted pictures of his apartment in LA and things like that, and he thought about entering the portal last offseason after leaving USC after 1 year, but ended up staying, and now leaves again in the middle of the season. So that Trojan front line, like you're saying, not very good at stopping the run. Their pass defense wise, USC is pretty good defensively, kind of middle of the road in the Big Ten, but because they struggle so much when it comes to stopping the run, that's why you see teams like Michigan and Minnesota be able to beat them. When Michigan started Alex Orji, who threw 12 times. Minnesota started the Brosmer, I believe his name is, the kid that
Max Brosmer, yes.
Yeah, came from New Hampshire and while he was a perfect passer at New Hampshire, certainly is not that here. Minnesota only threw 19 times last game. So I would expect, like you said before, that USC is probably going to do everything they can to try to stop the run from Penn State. And would you rather get killed would you rather get killed by Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, or would you rather try to get killed by Drew Aller? I think that they would rather, have Drew, try to throw the ball. But
if you're going to pick your poison, I mean, you take your chance on, force Drew Aller to try and beat you his arm. And again, I think Drew can do that.
I just don't know how successful they're going to be. I think that Penn State,
I don't know if they'll be able to force that to happen, though. I still think Singleton and Allen are going to, regardless, they could throw 7-8 guys in the box. I still think they're going to pick up their share of yards on the ground and just eventually, this is the thing too, just the physicality. Like when you come to the second half, especially, I really think they can wear down those lines of USC's. That's where you'll really start to see the advantages show up. And despite what they try to do to negate the run, it won't matter because their line gets pushed around.
I think you also saw last week just how we have these discussions about Singleton versus Allen, and I know everybody's back on like the Singleton bandwagon this year, and especially I don't say after last week because I thought Katron Allen was pretty good, but you just saw how less dynamic Penn State's rushing game is. But part of wearing a team down when we think of this USC defensive line versus Penn State's offensive line, and well, yes, that's like a big part of it. It's also having a fresh Katron Allen. It's having a fresh Nick Singleton. Neither of them are going to be having 22, 23 carries. Instead, they're going to be going series for series and staying fresh throughout. And if you're a USC defense that you just got done with the Katron Allen series where he's 5'11", 225, and obviously a tough runner, and all of a sudden you have Nick Singleton coming in who's also 225, 230, and is just as violent as a runner as especially this year. It's just a lot to keep up with. And again, I'm only specifically talking from like the optimistic perspective here, considering that we're saying why will Penn State win? That is how Penn State wins, by depending on the run, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton doing what they need to do, and that unfortunately or fortunately over the time of the game, maybe there's a slow start, maybe USC is able to stop them the first couple times, but you just have the belief that eventually that the dam will break, the same way that it did against Michigan and the same way that it did against Minnesota. So,
USC has a tendency to start slow too, Pat.
True. Yeah, they were down relatively big against Wisconsin as well. There's another team that they I won't say they almost lost to, because they certainly did pull away in the second half, but another team that gave them some trouble. And I think that's one of my main takeaways when looking at the USC defense. As good as Danton Lynn has been, they haven't exactly faced a murderer's row of offensive juggernauts. And granted, you could say the same for Penn State, but outside of that LSU game that opened the season, which that was a really good win for them, Utah State, certainly not that great. Michigan, extremely limited offensively. Wisconsin was already on their second string quarterback. And I mean, Minnesota and PJ Fleck are clearly not known for, the most explosive offenses. So I think even from them, like, yes, it's a key is going to be stopping Singleton and Katron Allen running the ball. But I would say that Drew is, even if, let's even say Nussmeier is on the same level as Drew, it's been, almost, going on 5-6 weeks since they've seen a quarterback that's going to be as capable as Drew is. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that Drew's better than Nussmeier, but at least in the same sphere. So it's just a lot for the USC defense. They're going to have to come out and certainly do something different than that they have been doing, because if they play the way that they did against, Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin, I don't know if they're going to be able to stop Penn State. So we'll see. Just one thing to make note. I just want to make sure that we touch on this with USC. Really good linebacker, Eric Gentry. He was a Philadelphia kid, actually, was from the area. He went to Arizona State first season, but has been at USC for the last, I believe this is his third year now. He's probably their best defensive player, linebacker, big kid, 6'6", 220, lanky guy. He was out last week, and it sounds like he's dealing with concussions, and it doesn't sound like it's a short-term thing. It sounds like it might need to be a potential redshirting issue for him. So certainly never root for that, especially when it comes to concussions, but doesn't sound like he'll be out there for USC. So Just once again, a big blow for that Trojan defense. What about Penn State's defense versus USC's offense? And we can kind of let's kind of curtail this into why will Penn State lose? Because I think if as good as Dantlin has been with USC, the strength is still in their offense. So what issues could USC's offense, give to Penn State?
If USC is going to win this game, it'll be because they turned it into a shootout. Because Penn State's going to try to just pound the rock, have some more sustained. Of course, they will have explosive plays. They want those, but they're not looking to score in just 3 or 4 plays. They want to pound USC into submission offense. So if USC is going to probably want to get some more quick scores, they're not a team that can ground and pound or, dink and dunk on opponents. They Lincoln Riley teams being explosive, and they got some dudes who are capable of that. Jacoby Lane, their leading receiver, about 4 touchdown catches.
So you say that, generally speaking, I would agree with you, right? That Lincoln Riley teams want to be explosive. That is not exactly how they're able to play though this year. So
no,
they're 11th.
I'm saying that's how they would, if they were going to beat Penn State, that's how they would do it. And for the record, I think Penn State can prevent that from happening, but we're talking if Penn State were going to lose this game, this is how it would happen. So they would, that old Lincoln Riley offense would come back this year somehow by some miracle. They're not capable of being that way this year, but let's just say that happens, like Jacoby Lane, Zachariah Branch, Kyron Hudson, Deuce Robinson, they're going off on that Penn State secondary, and Tom Allen's defense isn't able to dial up any pressure on Miller Moss. We got a redux from the second half against the Trojans in the 2017 Rose Bowl, where Sam Darnold had 5-6 seconds to throw every time. That creates opportunities for USC to just sling it around the field. And yeah, maybe they'll feed it some to Woody Marks, their capable tailback, who's been pretty good, but 460, averaging almost 6 yards a carry, although it's been a little more limited in Big Ten play, but he's actually a key part of the passing game too. So he's versatile. So it's just a matter of Penn State's just not able to generate pressure, not able to boss around their O-line like I think they're capable of, then that can create problems for the rest of the defense. And, USC can look like what a Lincoln Riley offense should look like, ideally. That would be the way. That turns a game into a shootout. That then puts pressure on Penn State to have to keep answering every time offensively. And so I don't think that's what Penn State wants to do. They want to slow it down a bit. I'm not talking like what Illinois tried to do with Penn State, like really slow it down, but just, they want to play their
Penn State's defense or Penn State's offense wants to slow it down.
Penn State's offense in general, they want to control time of possession. They don't want USC to, they want to get USC off the field as quickly as possible, so then they can come back. And
I just don't know if we've seen that from this. And so this is where, and to just give a little bit of fair warning, I'm very 50-50 on what I'm doing. And I'll give my score prediction at the end of this. I still might change it by the end of the week. I think with this Penn State defense, especially in first halves, with getting off to some slow starts, is that they're okay giving up third downs. They're okay allowing teams moving the ball, dink and dunking their way down the field. Where Penn State has kind of stepped up is in the red zone. They're really, really good in the red zone. I believe it's something like 41% touchdown rate, which is, I want to say, best in the Big Ten or second best in the Big Ten. So high up there. If once an offense gets into the red zone, Penn State has been pretty good at least preventing them from scoring touchdowns. But that means between the 20s that they are allowing teams to get down there. And I do wonder and worry that, yes, well, Lincoln Riley teams in the past have always been, don't care about time of possession, score as quickly as possible. If Riley looks at this situation and says, Miller Moss, he can force it here and there, but all in all, pretty good, game manager. USC has been really good on third downs, 51.52%. So that's fourth in the Big Ten. So they're able to convert on third downs. They actually have been able to run the ball this year, although they don't run a lot. Obviously, Lincoln Riley teams, are gonna want to pass the ball. But when they do run, they're averaging 5.12 yards per carry. That's fifth in the Big Ten. Once again, a good mark. I do wonder if we give Lincoln Riley his credit for being an offensive genius, and I certainly think he is. But if he can come up with a game plan of, I don't want to say being Illinois, but certainly slowing the game down, running the ball a little bit more, getting into third and manageable situations, and converting from there. I know it's easier said than done, but I think that's probably a better game plan for Riley going against Penn State than all of a sudden being able to create these explosive plays, because I just don't think that they have some good wide receivers, good running back, good quarterback in Miller Moss, but clearly that explosiveness isn't there. And just from what we've seen of Penn State this year, I think that could be a recipe for disaster of some sort. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I can see it. But again, like you alluded to, Penn State's, they've really held firm in the red zone.
Yeah.
So I think less than 50% of the time opponents are scoring touchdowns in the red zone, which I mean, that's very impressive. I mean, I can't emphasize how difficult it is to have that kind of success rate defensively in the red zone. And so, yeah, I think, you're all right. I think the key is going to be, once USC is getting a little closer into the reds, or they're in the red zone, you hold them to field goals, or maybe get them to miss a field goal, or maybe they go for it on fourth down and don't convert, like UCLA failed to do a couple times last week, things like that. But I'll say in the second half, I mean, this is the other thing. Well, I guess this kind of goes back to why I think Penn State will win, but second half defense has, it's been phenomenal. Let's face it. I mean, they really shut opponents down, and my point being, they've only given up. Sorry, a stat. They've only given up. The first team defense has only given up 17 points in the second half. So I mean, we're not counting that touchdown UCLA scored with 16 seconds left last week, because that was against backups. But the starting
some Bill Carter was still in the game on that series, I will just say.
Oh, there was some. It wasn't the full first team defense. Let's put it that way. So the full first team defense has only given up 17 points the entire second half, and they've given up 0 points in the third quarter, which, they were on a similar streak like that last year. I think Michigan finally broke that, and they only did it with a field goal. So I really think, that third quarter defense, especially second half defense, but especially third quarter, is going to be key. I mean, if Penn State can keep this up, I really think the third quarter is where they can really start to potentially pull away in this one.
No, and I think that can certainly be the case. I just, you go back to like the late Paterno teams, like 2008 Penn State team, oddly enough, like the big idea was that once they played a quarterback that could really push the ball downfield, that they would have some issues, as good as that defense had been. And oddly enough, they play USC, Mark Sanchez tears them up, and then the rest is history. I just don't think that like that type of game, like how Penn State lost. Well, yes, I don't think people necessarily thought that the defense would get torched the way that they did. Like, that was kind of their kryptonite, and we all knew that, and knew that was somewhat possible.
But Pat, I think this is a much more athletic defense than that 2008 squad ever was.
No. So that's what I'm saying. I don't foresee a scenario where it's like Penn State goes out there and USC just out athletes them and torches them deep, and Miller Moss is hitting 20 plus yarders. I think it's weird saying this about a Lincoln Riley offense, USC, but I do think that where Penn State can get beat is in the middle, the same way that you look at NFL defenses nowadays. Everything is making sure you're not getting beat over the top. But if you can stay committed to the run, which, to be fair, Lincoln Riley has shown that he does not like to be committed to the run. He's a 13-year-old that's playing Xbox or PlayStation, where it's like, you run on first down, once it's second and 9, you're like, never mind, throwing every down.
Gonna go all goes for first.
Exactly. All goes all of a sudden. And so stay committed to running the ball. And can you find the soft spots in the zone? There are soft spots in the zone. As for, any great defense is going to have, soft spots in the zone. And I think with Penn State that we have seen that here and there. Altmaier just flat out wasn't a good enough quarterback to really make Penn State pay for it. He was one read, and that was really it. So, you saw like some of those slants that he was able to complete, but by, as the game went on, that became less and less efficient for Illinois because Penn State knew what was going to happen. Miller Moss certainly isn't going to be mistaken for, Mark Sanchez. He's not going to be a first round pick, but I do think that there is a little bit more to him as far as, going through his progressions. Now, can Penn State, create more pressure than I don't want to say we've seen, because it has been a little bit better recently, but can they create pressure the same way that they were against Illinois and really, break the rhythm on Miller Moss? It absolutely could be the case. But I think if Penn State does lose, it's going to be because USC is able to, stay on schedule, and I don't want to say win it in a Big Ten manner, but at least win it in somewhat of a Big Ten manner than we've seen in the past from USC. So that's at least where I'm at with the USC offense versus the Penn State defense. I think that if you had to give an edge, what are you more confident in? USC's, because I think we both agree, the Penn State offense versus USC defense, we feel pretty good about Penn State offense there. Would you give an edge to, do you think Penn State's defense is better than USC's offense, just, man for man?
I'd say I'd give them the slight edge. Yes. I think this is, again, I'm saying this is not the last couple Rose Bowls where maybe they could out athlete our guys, especially, if you think about the 2008 or 2009 Rose Bowl, where
did you see
still have visions of USC receivers being like 10, 15 yards past
Anthony Sparano,
easy, just bomb from Sanchez. But no, it's not going to be like, I think they can, I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Allen throws in some man coverage there too. So I think Penn State's secondary can hang with these guys in man coverage. And also, again, goes back to my thing in the trenches. I really love Penn State, on both sides, including the D line against their O line. And I think by the second half, you're going to see that advantage really start to rear its head. And I think they're going to get pressure on Miller Moss, get him running for his life, get some sacks, maybe force a fumble or maybe a interception, or just put him in bad spots, really. So it really comes back to, I think, I give a slight edge to the defense. Not to say USC doesn't have guys offensively. They certainly do. And I think they will put up some points, especially early on. But again, that second half defense has been pretty lights out overall. So I see no reason to think that won't continue this week.
No, that makes sense. And we'll also say that USC's offensive line, although if you look at the stats, it says that they've only given up 8 sacks, which is pretty good. 4 of those did come against Michigan. So the step up in competition, I'd say, as far as where Penn State's defensive line is compared to Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Utah State, LSU, I certainly think that Penn State is more in line with the Michigan defensive line, although Michigan's defensive line is quite good as well. So we'll see. I like I said before, I'm kind of going back and forth on all this. And to be fair, I know that if Penn State played USC, they probably win 7 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10. I don't know. I just think that, like I was saying before, I feel like almost every team in the country, and honestly, including Ohio State and Texas and all those guys, everyone is flawed. It just feels like one of those years, as we saw last week with, the upsets that happened, that nobody's going to get out unscathed. And I know that, for Penn State fans, we're all looking at that Ohio State game and likely think that's the one loss. That's 11-1. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. And I don't like going out West Coast. I know there's been, I don't think any Big Ten team has won. I guess Indiana beat UCLA.
They're, I think it's 1-7, 2-7, something like that.
Yeah.
But you also got to look at who the teams are that have been traveling cross country. It's like Northwestern and Purdue and, maybe not Purdue, but just teams that are more towards the bottom of the conference. So
Michigan.
So take that with a grain of salt. I will say, that being said, that's probably the thing that maybe concerns me the most. And I know the team's going to leave tomorrow, which is smart on their part. Get a day and a half to get acclimated to that time zone difference and your new surroundings. But yeah, of course, it's something they've never done before. They've never flown cross country for a game in the middle of the season. So this will be something new. And I'm sure, just like how Franklin had copious notes that was able to consult for the West Virginia game this year about how to deal with a lightning delay because he experienced it for the first time in 2017 against Michigan State. He was, I think, win or lose this weekend, at least he'll have notes and, be able to tweak things and know how to handle a cross country trip next time they do it. I think next year they're going to UCLA, so he'll at least have a better idea how this thing will work. And that being said, though, I don't think I don't think it's much of a home field advantage at the Coliseum. It's not exactly a rocking joint, and they're USC fans are kind of notorious for not really showing up for these games. And tons of Penn State alumni in LA and the Southern California area, and I have no doubt there's going to be a bunch of them out in force there on Saturday. And every time, if you're watching on TV, I'm sure every time Penn State makes a big play, you'll hear it get loud over there. So I really, the concerning thing to me is I'm more concerned with the cross country travel than the stadium atmosphere. If you're comparing the two.
Score prediction. What are you expecting? Yes, so, the expected score prediction based upon the folks out of Vegas is 28-23 Penn State. So they are expecting tight one for sure. So what are you thinking, Tim?
I'm saying 31-24 Penn State. I think I just comes back to I like Penn State's advantage in the trenches. I like their ability to run the ball, and USC has had, as you alluded to, they've had major problems stopping the run. I mean, a one-dimensional offense like Michigan was able to put up 27 points on them. I mean, and Penn State can at least throw the ball too if need be. So I really think there's opportunities for the offense to put up some points. Defensively, I guess, USC, I could see them putting up some points early in the game, but again, second half defense has just been lights out. And I really think once again, they will, they'll adjust, and also they're going to wear down that O-line over the course of 4 quarters. And it is going to rear its ugly head in the third and fourth quarters. I mean, you're going to see, I think, Moss get rushed, maybe get sacked. They'll stuff the run. I mean, they're just going to make life miserable for the Trojans in the second half. And I just think that allows Penn State to put some distance between them and USC and ultimately get out of there with the dub.
Like I said, I'm going back and forth. I'll say 34-31 Penn State for now. I don't know if I'm just in my own head about it, but I'm
surprised. I thought you were going to pick. It sounded like you were going to pick USC with the way you were talking about it.
I'm trying to balance out a little bit. I feel like we come on here a lot and we're like, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine, easy. And then Penn State kind of sometimes looks like poo-poo. So I'm trying to make sure I'm not being too much of a homer. But no, I do think that this is a trickier game than I don't say we're all expecting, but USC absolutely could have beat Michigan. I don't remember if it was like a 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 that they had them.
Michigan had a 4th and goal.
4th and goal. It wasn't there Mulling's big like 60-yard carry? Wasn't that 4th and 1 or? I
don't remember, but I'm talking about at the end when Michigan scored the winning touchdown in the final minute. But they had a 4th and goal situation, and I mean, it's do or die for Michigan right there. USC just stops them, they win that game. And Minnesota, I mean, a little bit different, but if let's say they don't overturn well, they rightfully overturned a non-touchdown call because that was a touchdown. Let's say, they stick with their guns after review, and does USC go on and win that in overtime? Who knows? But so I mean, I'm not trying to say USC isn't dangerous or can't win this game. They certainly can. I just think the way Penn State has played, and again, I love their advantage in the trend. I just think I just don't suddenly see USC getting a lot better in the trenches between now and Saturday enough to turn the tide in their favor.
Yeah, and once again, like I said, I understand that like Penn State's the favorite, and that's does count for something.
By the way, I don't know if you saw Bill Connolly. He has his S&P plus prediction is 33-24 Penn State, so he's even more bullish than the odds makers.
There was a lot of S&P plus predictions last week that didn't work out. That's all I'm saying. Like I don't know if I watched this. I don't know if I watched this Penn State team, and I just think that everything is going to be, peaches and cream and sunshine and roses up until that Ohio State game, and then after that Ohio State game. I just think that you watch them, and is it possible that they could clumpy flump their way to 11-1 playing how they played? Yes. I think if they do play like that, play like how they did against UCLA, even how they did against Illinois, although I realize that, looking at the box score, that Penn State played a much more dominant game, but it's one of those like, F around and you find out type things. And I do think that Penn State just continues to play like their B-level game, that they could potentially get caught. If Penn State comes out and they play to their best and USC plays to their best, absolutely, completely understand that Penn State wins. I just think that, where this is at the week before a bye week, leaving Beaver Stadium for the first time in 5-6 weeks at this point, going to a different stadium that they haven't played in, and just the West Coast travel, and just everything that we talked about as far as USC's offense versus Penn State's defense, and maybe some holes there. I just have a little bit of pause about what to expect from Penn State, and I don't know, not that USC is exactly world beaters, but like we were saying before, they had their opportunities to beat Michigan, they had their opportunities to beat Minnesota, and I do wonder if you switch some of those plays, if we're all thinking of this game, I don't say a little bit more seriously, but just a little bit differently. So I'm kind of sticking with what I was thinking about USC this entire time, rather than, I don't know, just letting a couple close losses change too much. Just because.
Well, to be fair, Pat, even before this, I thought Penn State, this is actually, I know I said Penn State would go 11-1. I said my preseason prediction. I said USC would be it was the game I felt least confident about as far as games that I predicted Penn State to win, because my 11-1 was predicated on losing to Ohio State only. But of course, I reserve the right to change my mind, and I'll say, well, obviously, while I'm not changing my mind from the preseason pick, I do, just having seen these teams play, I have a big enough sample size, and so even if they had pulled out those wins, Michigan and Minnesota, I still be thinking to myself, these guys can be bossed around in the trenches, and will not change my prediction still. Like, I just feel more confident now that Penn State's going to win than I did maybe a few weeks ago. If that makes sense.
Honestly, I wish that they would have pulled those teams out, just because then
we'd be talking about a possibility of, what's the narrative on James Franklin Camp struggles to beat ranked teams on the road. Now we're going to get robbed of that.
Well, college football playoff wise, that's the other side of things, that Penn State has weirdly worked Penn State hasn't worked their way. Their schedule has worked their way into, like, Penn State absolutely needs like Illinois to stay ranked, because that very well could be the only ranked win that Penn State has. And it will be okay if Penn State goes 11-1. It will not be okay if they go 10-2, and if you lose to a USC, or you lose to a Washington, or you lose to whoever, because all of a sudden Penn State's strength of schedule not looking exactly too hot. So I think
if you go 11-1 or even 10-2, it's not going to matter. Like a 10-2 Big Ten team is getting in.
I don't know about that, Tim. It is much tighter. It is much. I've already looked at it. It is much tighter than you would think.
Well, definitely 11-1 would get them in
Yes,
without
11-1
any
for sure.
question. And I feel reasonably confident 10 but look, if they beat USC this weekend, I feel even more confident about my 11-1 prediction from the preseason. So
the problem with going 10-2 is there's a scenario where a lot of SEC teams all go 10-2 as well. Like Tennessee goes 10-2, Ole Miss goes 10-2, and all those SEC teams are going to have more ranked wins than Penn State does. And that's where, once again, I would just please start winning. USC, Washington, Illinois, West Virginia. Hello, come on. Let's win. We need your wins so you can be ranked, so we can look good. We're already 45 minutes into this, so we don't have to go too long, but kind of similar to the college football playoff thing. I do want to ask, because I've been supposed to be, or I want to write this rooting interest thing for BSD about who should Penn State fans be rooting for in all these games. It's just kind of hard to know when Penn State's, undefeated, because honestly, you just kind of have to care about Penn State. Ohio State and Oregon play this weekend. It's a big game at an Autzen. Who should I be rooting for, Tim? Because I don't know.
I would tell you to root for, I would root for Ohio
Penn State,
because Penn State, look, I think Ohio State is going. I have a hard time seeing Ohio State losing more than one game in the entire slate. If they lose to Oregon, I think they end up beating Penn State. If they beat Oregon, there's still that possibility maybe Penn State can catch them for an upset. But I mean, look, I don't think they're doing any worse than 11-1 or one loss in Big Ten play. If they beat Oregon, though, Oregon still has, they get Illinois at home last week of October, which that's a game they should be favored and should win. But, Illinois will give them a fight. I wouldn't doubt it. They go on the road at Michigan that first weekend of November when Penn State's playing Ohio State. And I think they should beat Michigan, given how one-dimensional they are offensively. But then again, you never know. And then they Maryland, at home, they should be without much trouble. And they do it to go on the road to Wisconsin. But again, I don't think Wisconsin is all that good, even though it'd be at Camp Randall. And then they finish the year with Washington, their pseudo rival Washington at home. And, Washington, I think Oregon's a better team, but we never know in those games. They could potentially drop another game. If they lose to Ohio State, there's a possibility they could drop another game. I think it's more likely they drop multiple games and Ohio State drops multiple games during the regular season. So I would be inclined to root for Ohio State here.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the right answer is root for Ohio State. It's just also beyond that, I know this doesn't make sense, but I don't want Big Ten. I don't want Penn State in the Big Ten conference championship. If they lose to Ohio State, just go 11-1 and just stop. I don't care about playing Ohio State again in the Big Ten championship just to probably lose again, to be honest, when that's only gonna, I would imagine, only hurt our chances of, I don't know, making the playoff or not making the playoff, but certainly hurt our seeding chances. In my ideal world, Penn State goes 11-1.
No, they would look again, 11-1. They're in. It's not even a question of.
But I'm talking about seeding, though. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, seeding, I agree. Maybe seeding it could be affected somewhat, but I don't even think the seeding would get as affected as you think it would, because yeah, you're playing that extra game that you could lose. But again, if you're 11-2 and your two losses were to Ohio State, including in the Big Ten championship game, and and especially if you're competitive in those games, I don't think the committee is going to hold it too much against Penn State.
But what I'm saying is my ideal scenario is 11-1, 5 seed. I don't think that
okay,
you're
going, I would that would be great. I would like that.
Because I would like the group of 5 champs.
Yeah, because you're probably getting Boise State or I don't know.
Yes. Rather than getting a Tennessee or Ole Miss type thing. So and potentially a road game, which also you don't want. So that is, I'm trying to figure out the rooting interest, and it's going to be weird once, not that I'm going to root against Penn State against Ohio State. Of course, want Penn State to win, but I already got my spin zone for that game. So don't worry about that. We actually don't want to win. We want the 5 seed. because then we get a home game against maybe Boise State, which is very nice. All right, we're going 49 minutes, almost 50 minutes, starting to ramble on talking about the 5 seed when I'm also saying that Penn State might lose to USC. So let's take it one game at a time here. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Make sure that you are subscribing on YouTube. Last check, which was earlier today, we had 85 subscribers. Please make sure you're subscribing. At 100, I will take my shirt off and do one of the shows shirtless. So
only 15 subscribers away from getting that, folks. So
shirtless.
If you haven't already, you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel.
Yes. Make sure you're reading all our stuff at blackshoediaries.com. Tons of stories every single day on Penn State and college football at large. Make sure you're following the Twitter account, BSD Tweet. You can follow Tim and I on Twitter as well. You can see our Twitter usernames below our faces. Once again, thank you guys for watching. And Tim will not be on the Saturday post-game show, but we will have Ellie in his place. So it'll be myself and Ellie. So we will see you then. Thanks for watching.